Welcome everybody to the LSA's Understanding Local Search Ranking Factors webinar. Today is May 4th. I'm Greg Sterling. I'm the VP of Strategy and Insights for the LSA, and I'm joined by Brittany Muller of Moz and Darren Shaw of Whitespark, who's now the organizer and principal author of the study. So next slide, please. There may be some people on the webinar today who don't know what the LSA is, and just real quickly, we're a not-for-profit trade association that's focused on location-based marketing, both for multi-location brands and for small businesses and all the companies that service the local search ecosystem. And we're very, very excited and pleased to be hosting this webinar today. These are some of the things that we offer, some of the events we run. If you want more information, you can go to thelsa.org. But I want to turn it over to Darren and let him introduce himself and the study so that we allow maximum time for the conversation. So Darren, please take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. I just wanted to quickly say thanks to Greg and Joe for getting all this organized through the Local Search Association, and thanks to Brittany and the rest of the team at Moz for helping to collaborate on this, and also huge thanks for getting the local search ranking factors organized and up on the Moz website there. So just really quickly about Whitespark and myself. So I'm Darren Shaw. I started Whitespark in 2005, and we specialize in software and services for local search. So we have a citation audit and cleanup service that we work on for enterprises down to small businesses. We do some consulting, citation building, and we have some software stuff too. So what we are about, that's my background. I've been doing local search since probably 2007, 2008, and on a consulting basis, and then kind of got into the software thing about 2010. So today we're talking about the local search ranking factors. You can find it on Moz at moz.com, local search ranking factors. So there's a URL there. This is the annual study that David Mim has been putting out for years. I think the first one was in 2008. So I must thank David Mim for this opportunity. You know, David has been a real, massive influencer in local search, since the beginning of local search, since local search was a thing. Him and Mike Blumenthal, really were the founders almost of it as an industry. And so David has been running this for years, and he's been a real mentor to me in my career. And when he decided that he was going to do less local search stuff, and he's kind of moved into an adjacent industry, email marketing, he reached out and said who might be interested in doing this, and I put up my hand. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to be running this survey. I think that the local search ranking factors is one of the pinnacle resources in our industry that helps us to understand what's driving local search rankings. So huge thanks, David. David's now moved on to his new company. It's called Citations. It's this genius service that a small business can get into email marketing for hardly any effort at all. They basically just sign up with their Facebook page. It pulls content from your Facebook page, and it pulls content from the top RSS feeds within your industry, and then it sort of says, here's your newsletter, and then you can just review it, add a little bit of stuff, and then click send. And so it sends out this great weekly newsletter. It's like a link roundup and just what's happening in an industry. So like a personal trainer or spas or real estate, anyone could use this to get into email marketing for very little effort. So it's a great product, and David, I wish you all the best with it. And we thank you for all that you've done for local search. And he's not going away, thankfully. He's still very involved in local search. He's still doing the column on Street Fight with Mike Blumenthal. He's still writing about and thinking about local search. He's just really busy and focused on his business right now. So I wanted to start off with some definitions, given that the local search ranking factors handed to me is a great opportunity to define some of this, because there's a lot of different words out there for some of the stuff that local search practitioners talk about. And so I wanted to define some of them. So what is your GMB listing? So your GMB stands for Google My Business, and your listing, it's published on 3 places. So it's published on Google Search, Google Maps, or Google+. The URL of your listing is tricky. It used to be, your Google Places listing, and then it became your Google Plus local listing. And so you had this URL you could send people to and say, this is where my listing is. Now it's not as easy. There are 3 places that your listing lives. One is in Google search. So if you type in a search like business name and address, you'll get what's called the knowledge panel on the right hand side. It looks like this. And so this is kind of the primary place where your listing lives now. You can find it in Maps. So if you just Google the business name in Maps, you'll find it there. You can also find it on Google+. So it's interesting that Google+ has kind of been disconnected from local search, but they still list it as a place that your Google listing lives. I don't know how long that will last. So your GMB landing page is referenced in the local search ranking factors a lot, and that is the page that you get to from your listing. So if I click website here, it goes to this page. And in most cases, the vast majority of businesses, especially small businesses, link that to their homepage. But if you're a multi-location or enterprise brand, you'd often link this to location-specific pages. So Home Depot, for example, links all of their GMB listings to their location pages. So this is called the local pack. It is, this is your standard local pack. So you would get this for terms like dentists, lawyers, salons and spas, etc. And it looks like this. It's got a little map at the top. You get stars, phone numbers, addresses, links to the website, and directions. This is a variation on it. It's called a local ABC pack. And this comes up for branded terms. So if you type in Starbucks or McDonald's, you should get an ABC pack. They look like this. The big thing that's missing here is the stars. So you won't have the stars, and they don't list the full address often. And so if for some weird reason, if you type in storage or pet stores, you always get an ABC pack, but otherwise it's branded. But storage people must be irritated that they don't get the review stars because they always return this ABC pack. I don't really know what's up with that. It's a mystery. This is called the local snack pack. And so I want to just talk about local pack, local snack pack. They are different, and I'm defining them as different. Snack packs is the special type that appears with anything that has in the entertainment industry or hospitality. So if you have restaurants or hotels or golf courses or nightclubs, anything that's kind of entertainment-y or hospitality, you will get what's called the snack pack. And the differentiator here is that there's no website or directions. There's a photo instead, and no phone number. So they are hard to parse for local rank trackers. I know that from personal experience. So local sponsored pack, these are new. You'll see Google's testing these across the country. You see this is this weird double one. If you go San Diego Plumbers, you get this sponsored pack, and then you get a regular pack below it. So this is, people are paying to get into this, or Google guaranteed as part of a special program they're running. Same thing with San Francisco Plumbers. You type in that and you're going to get this special sponsored pack. This thing is called the local finder. So the way you get to that is, if I go back to this view here, see it at the bottom here, more places. When you click more places, you end up on the local finder. So the local finder will list all the other businesses. So the local pack only shows 3. The local finder, you can scroll through to see all the other businesses that are in the area. So those are some definitions. Hopefully that clears up some of the stuff on the naming of these things. So given the opportunity to run the survey, I made a few changes to it. I kind of want to go through what's different this year compared to how it has been in previous years. I added a new factors versus competitive difference makers. And the idea with that is I wanted to understand from the participants, I guess I should explain how the survey works. The survey works by surveying 40-ish people that are in the local search industry, and they answer about, well, they sort of score 130 some different factors into like what are the top most important things that are actually driving rankings, and then I aggregate all that data and analyze it. So one of the foundational factors. So in this question I asked, what are the top foundational factors that are driving local search, and what are the competitive difference makers? So a foundational factor is like you need this in order to even have a seat at the table to be able to rank, but doing more of it isn't going to improve your rankings. Like, for example, setting the proper Google My Business category is a foundational factor, but you can't keep doing that. But yet, if you don't do it, you're not going to rank. And competitive difference makers are things like links. You can keep building links forever. You can keep adding great content to your website. So those are competitive difference makers. I also asked them about the impact of the Opossum update. I want to know, how their tactics have changed since they started, since the Opossum update, and if they're doing anything different, or what factors are more important to them since Opossum. More comments. So the commentary in the local search ranking factors is amazing. There's so much insight in there, so I really encourage you to read through them. It'll take you an hour. There's a lot of work there, but it's worthwhile. There's amazing insights in there. So I want to encourage more of that. So this time I asked very specific questions and to try and squeeze out more information from people. And then I added and dropped a bunch of factors. Some factors don't make sense anymore, like you used to be able to edit the Google My Business description, and you can't anymore. So I dropped that factor, and then I've added a bunch of new factors. So the survey is structured into 5 key areas. First one is the thematic ranking signal. So this is where I just ask them in general, like, citations, reviews, links, website signals, how would you score those and how would you rank them in terms of strength towards the overall rankings? So that's the thematic ranking signals. Then I ask, specific factors in the local pack finder and local organic, where they sort those 140 different factors and they pick their top 20. So I think these are the top 20 factors, and I put them in this order of importance. And so when 40 people do that and then you aggregate the results, you get this sense of what's really important in local search and what's not so important. So there's tons of factors that are in there that the public never sees because they're not really much of a factor at all. So, and then I do that on the local pack finder and the local organic, just to clarify the pack finder results is the local pack, and then the local organic results are, if you typed in something like Denver lawyers, you would see in the bottom of the results, underneath the pack, just blue links of actual lawyers in Denver, but their website. So those are the organic results. Foundational versus competitive ranking factors. So this is that section I talked about where I had asked them, what are the most important foundational factors and what do you think are the most important competitive ranking difference makers? The impact of the Opossum update, I talked about that. And then negative ranking factors. So these are the factors where I asked the participants to say, what could be most harmful to your listing? For example, if your website has malware on it and it's been flagged by Google, or if you have the wrong category set in Google My Business, or if you're spamming the Google My Business title tag, or if you have a bunch of fake reviews, like what are the things that could actually hurt your rankings? And so that's what the negative ranking factors section is. So we can't go through everything. There's a ton of stuff there. I encourage you to look at it on the Moz website, but here are some high-level results and observations that I wanted to point out. I think they're really interesting to look at. So first of all, this is the pie chart. If you've looked at the ranking factors before, you've seen a version of this. It changes every year. Just basically percentages shift in different sections. So social has had a drop. Reviews has been increased. Links has been increased. Citations have been decreased. We're seeing like lesser importance on citations, more emphasis on links and reviews. And so this is just sort of showing you the general stuff that makes up a ranking on Google. So if you want to rank in the local pack, you've got to invest in your Google My Business. You've got to have citations. You've got to be working on your on-page, your links, your reviews, etc. And so these are all the things that are going into the rankings in the local pack and finder. So on the thematic side, I want to look at the increased importance. So links, in 2015, they went from 14.83 to 17.31, so they've had a 16% increase. Reviews have seen a 21% increase. Behavioral signals have seen an 18% increase. I'm surprised that's not even higher. I think over time that's going to get higher. And personalization saw an increase, but really, it went from 8.21 to 9.76, so it's not really that notable that personalization is that much more important. And now decreasing in importance, we have Google My Business signals have taken a small drop. On-page signals took a really minor drop. Citation signals, it looks like a significant drop from 17 to 13.1. So I think that people are seeing that citations are more foundational than competitive difference maker, and they're putting less effort into that, more into links. Social signals saw a big increase, but 4.58, or a big decrease. 4.58 to 3.53 isn't huge. this is pretty big news. Physical address in the city of search used to be the #1 ranking factor. It almost was since the beginning. It was always like, you know, in order to rank, you have to be in the city. Of course, that's going to be an important ranking factor. But it's now the #2 ranking factor, and that means there's a new ranking factor, and it is the proximity of address to the point of search. So we've seen a huge increase in importance of proximity in the local pack and finder results. It's really massive, and I did a post about it on the Moz blog a while back, not too long ago. I think maybe October it was published, where I just talked about how I showed a number of examples of where if you type in plumbers, if you type in bakeries, if you type in storage, the results are so skewed to like how close you are, and I'll talk about that in a bit here. Proximity to address to the point of search has gone from, you know, the #4 factor in 2015 to the #1 factor. It's gone up, you know, 3 spots, which is pretty huge when you get to the top of that group. Proximity of address to Centroid of other businesses. This was this idea that businesses were clustered. So if you typed in lawyers, you would like see a cluster of lawyers on the West End or whatever. That's seen a decrease. I think this is, and that's valid. It is less important than it used to be. And proximity of address to Centroid saw a massive drop from #16 to #50. I don't really think that's valid. I'm going to talk about that as well. So proximity of address to the point of search. This is one of the examples from my post at MozCon, on the Moz blog. So if you type in plumbers, these are the plumbers around my location. So if you look at the businesses that are ranking here, we have this DollarWise, Fast, Mayfair, rankings 1, 2, and 3. None of them have claimed their listing, so these are all no. They haven't claimed. 2 of them don't even have websites. The other one has, you know, regular content on their website. In terms of links, well, if you don't have any websites, you can't get any links. This guy doesn't have too many links. It's not bad for a small business. Citations, you know, there's nothing really notable about citations. None of them even have reviews. Question: why these 3 businesses? They don't have any of the traditional ranking factors. They don't really have anything going on. No reviews, no websites. Haven't even claimed their listing. Why are they ranking? It's this row at the bottom. They're close to me, so I could actually walk to any of these businesses. So for me, this is a real failure on Google. Like, I don't really care to find the closest plumber. I'm looking for the plumber that is the best. So it really reduces the quality of Google's local pack results, and it makes it very frustrating for business owners that are trying to rank in the local pack, because you basically have a very small radius around your business that you can rank in now. So this is a big deal in local search now. This is why it is now the #1 local search ranking factor, and it's an unfortunate one. Why are they doing this? I think they're doing this for ad revenue, really. I think, you know, if you're a business and you used to rank across the whole city and now you don't, well, how do you get across the whole city? Well, you can buy some AdWords. This one is interesting. So proximity of address to Centroid. I think that this has seen a big drop, but I wouldn't think that it's actually not important anymore. I still think it's very important, and I think it's very important for industries like hotels. So if you type in Seattle hotels, when you type in the word Seattle, you're explicitly telling Google the location, and it basically sets the proximity around the centroid of the city. And so these 3 hotels that are ranking for Seattle hotels, we can see how close they are. I mapped them on Google Maps from the centroid, and they're like 10-minute, 12-minute, 8-minute walks. So they're all right around the centroid. So for hotels, this proximity issue is a big issue, because, you know, people looking for hotels, it's like if you're not right in the center of the city, your hotel's going to have a hard time ranking in a local pack. All right, so I added some new citation factors. I want to talk about these citation factors. Before, we used to have this one factor that was called consistency of structured citations, and this was an important factor. Everyone knew that it's important to have your citations consistent across the web, but there are nuances to this, and so I wanted to break it down a little bit further. Like, the big question is, how far do you have to go? So I kind of got rid of that as a single factor, and I broke it into 4 other factors. So I wanted to know, like, what is the consistency on the primary data sources? So these would be like the data aggregators and Google and Bing, etc. What are the consistency on tier 1 sites? So this would be like Yellow Pages, Yelp, Facebook, really important business listing sites that you see ranking all the time. Consistency on tier 3 sites, like you're getting into some of Yelp, Yext network, like a lot of those extra sites that you see on Yext distribution list. And then tier 4 would just be everything else, like all the other sites across the web. So by doing this, I was able to, in the results, see the nuances of this, like what is actually really important for consistency. And I wanted to pull that out of the survey. I also added some additional factors like enhancement, completeness of citation, presence of the business on these curated best of and similar lists. These are huge. It didn't really get surfaced in the result, but I encourage you to think about that. How can you get listed on these best of lists? Because I actually think that's a very strong ranking factor. Proper category associations on the aggregator, so making sure that your categories are correct and accurate across all of the most important citation sources, and prominence on key industry relevant domains. So these would be like if you're a lawyer, Avo, for example, or health grades in the medical industry. Okay. Please don't try to read all this. I know there's a lot of information on this slide, so just kind of ignore all those titles on the left. What I'm trying to show you here is that a lot of factors were dropped and a lot of factors were added. So anything that has an NA in the 2015 column, that means it's a factor that didn't exist. It's a factor that didn't exist in 2015. So So this is where we can kind of see how these priorities are shifting. The reason I bring this up is because, you might have seen a drop in citations overall, but they're still extremely important. They're still a very important foundational factor. If you don't get the citations, if you don't get them right on the primary data sources and the tier 1 sources and even the tier, 2 sources, you're going to have a hard time ranking. So don't let that drop in citations make you think, well, I don't need to worry about citations. I need to focus everything on links. You still need them. They're just not the competitive difference maker. It's like you get them so that you have the chance to rank. And so because of all the shifting, there were 7 factors that were citation related in 2015 that made the top 50. And in 2017, because I kind of broke them up into multiple factors, now there's 10 factors. So just the point is citations are still important. Don't forget about them. This is a big thing. So I want you, again, don't read all this stuff. It's too much. It's information overload. Just look at the right-hand column where it says change. Look at all these pluses. Everything related to links, all of these individual link factors are up across the board, well, except for one, which stayed the same. So this is really a theme of this year's local search ranking factors. Local SEOs are seeing great benefit from localized link building or just general link building. The more links you can get to your website, the better it impacts your local search rankings. Looking at the comments section, I had tons of pages, but look at this. So if in the comments, if I do a Control F for it, the word links was mentioned 76 times. All the local SEOs that gave commentary, they just talked about links and how links were really the thing that was moving the needles for them. So that's a big takeaway here. Think about local links and how you can get more. By comparison, reviews were mentioned 45 times and citations were mentioned 32 times in the comments. So links really are the big story from this year's local search ranking factors. Here are some Google My Business factors I wanted to mention. So I mentioned earlier the description field is no longer a factor. Thankfully, it's not, because it never really was a factor. Google, it was just like a place where people would spam and stuff, and it wouldn't help your rankings at all. It would only potentially hurt them. It was a place that Google would look for spam signals. So not that anymore. There are now attributes. So this is coming down to Google My Business, where you'll be able to manage your attributes. Right now, they're crowdsourcing attribute information. So, for example, if you might have seen this on the Google Maps app, or you're on Maps on desktop, it'll ask you like, oh, do you know things about this business? Is it wheelchair accessible? Is it casual dining? Is it family friendly? Like all these questions that they're asking you, those are attributes. And Google's trying to collect this data for all of these business types, and they're really increasing this. And attributes are a much better way to understand a business than owner-submitted descriptions. So description is out, attributes are in. And then also, we've seen a lot of filtering options coming up with Google. So I believe once they have more and more attribute data, you'll be able to filter the local pack results much better. And this is just starting to come out. So let's look at the Google My Business factors. Again, maybe just focus on the right-hand column. You know, you can see some of that went up. So location keyword in the business title went up 5. Having your business verified stayed about the same. The primary category matches a broader category of the search category. This is a weird factor. It's hard to explain. Basically, if I set my category to restaurant, then a search for pizza will help. So the primary category being the broad one is a factor that people think is important. Age of Google My Business listing, that went down a little bit. I'm going to talk about that. But anyways, these are some of the Google My Business specific factors. So these two factors, I really want to highlight these because the movement in the ranking factor results does not actually reflect the real world right now. These two factors, so if you put your product service keyword in the business title or you put your location keyword in the business title, they are massive needle movers. You will, honestly, I've heard lots of stories where people, I ranked like 40 in the local finder. I put the keyword in my business title and now I'm number 2 in the local pack. So those kinds of impacts can happen. And people are using it. They are spamming the heck out of it. Look at some of these examples. Mike Blumenthal on his blog has this thing called the Spam Hall of Shame. And so he puts up some of these examples where people are just going overboard with spamming the business title. Sadly, it does work. It will improve your rankings. You are taking a big risk if you start messing around with it of getting penalized. Right now, what's typically happening is you'll have your competitors report you, and then they change your business name back to what it should be, and then the spammy business owners go back and change it back. And so it's this back and forth battle of getting reported, and Google fixes it, and then they put it back. And so right now there is no penalty for it, but I caution you about this because I believe that it could be similar to what we saw happen with the Penguin update, where everyone that had been doing shady link building, Google had a long history of that, and one day the update came and all these businesses got knocked out. All these websites got manual spam actions and they got penalized. I predict the same kind of thing might happen with the people that are my business title, so don't do it. It's not worth the risk. Whether or not you can get away with it now, I do not recommend it. It's just shady. Don't do it. Age of the Google My Business listing is an interesting factor. It actually went down 2 spots, but that Joy Hawkins and Colin Nielsen rated it very highly. So it was like one of the top factors that they pointed out. And these two, they are top contributors at the Google My Business Forum. And top contributors at the Google My Business Forum have a little bit of inside info. So I'm not saying they know something we don't know, but they might know something we don't know. Association of photos is a factor that saw some increase this year. It makes sense to me. A business with lots of photos will get more engagement metrics on their listing. People will be clicking through their photos. They're spending more time on their listing. That could be a factor that Google's picking up on. A business that is getting user-contributed photos, that is another behavior factor. So I think that having lots of good photos on your listing is a good idea. I would recommend doing it. Add your business hours because this guy, Nick Niels, said to do it. He pointed this out. He cited a case that they had worked on at Location 3 where they had a business that had been suppressed by the Opossum filter. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And by adding the business hours, they were lifted out of the filter. So this is interesting and noteworthy, which is why I mentioned it in this talk. Make sure that you have your business hours added and accurate on your listings. So what is the impact of Opossum? So we saw some factors go up. So I asked them, like, what are you focusing on more since the Opossum update? And these are the factors. Don't even read them. What are you focusing on less since Opossum? Those are the factors that people are focusing on less. But don't worry about that because honestly, everyone said this. They said there's been no real change to the SEO tactics or strategy that they've been doing because of Opossum. No one has really, it just hasn't impacted how they approach local search or what they do or what is impacting rankings. The real thing that Opossum did has been this thing called the filter. So Opossum will filter listings that are in the same category and at the same address. So if you have, lawyers, two personal injury lawyers in the same office, one of them is very likely to get filtered. If you have two hotels that are right next to each other, we've seen some filtering there. So the big impact on local search practitioners is that they have been identifying and troubleshooting this filtered listing problem that Opossum has picked up. And I think, Google implemented this update to try and clean up the results, or like clean up a lot of duplicates. But there's a lot of shrapnel that's taken out other businesses as well. So this is the main thing that Opossum has impacted. So what are the foundational ranking factors? What are the factors that you must have in order to even have a chance at ranking? And so you've got to have your proper Google My Business categories set up. Like if you don't have the right category, you're never going to rank. You should have consistent citations on the primary data sources. This is really important. If they're not consistent there, then that could really impact your ability to rank. You should be located in the city. That's kind of obvious. If you're not located in the city, then you're not going to rank. As we talked about, you should be close to the searcher. Whenever they're searching, if you're in like a 2 or 3 mile radius, you have a much better chance of ranking. And you should also have consistent citations on the tier 1 citation sources. If I did the top 10, you'd probably see, again, consistency of citations on the tier 2 citation sources. So these are the 5 things that really were pulled out. In terms of competitive difference makers, so once you have those things in place, because basically everyone's going to have those things in place, then the next thing you do is you focus on these things: quality and authority of the links to your domain, quality of inbound links to domain from industry-specific sites. So let's say you've got a link from you're a lawyer, you're getting a link from a lawyer-specific website, a lawyer blog or whatever. Quality and authority of inbound links to the Google My Business landing page URL. Quality and authority of links to the domain from locally relevant domains. So this is, you're located in Denver, some Denver blog mentions you. And then the only one that's not link related is reviews. And this makes sense to me. I agree with this. Links and reviews. These are the difference makers. Focus on that. I'm surprised content didn't make the list, because I would say you can set yourself apart from your competition by writing and publishing excellent content on your website. So start with your service pages, break down all your service pages into multiple service pages, any sub-services, and just really go hog wild on writing everything you can think of about that topic, and then you can take it to the blog and that kind of stuff. What I like about these two sections, so foundational and competitive, is that they're the basics of how to rank in local. If you put those two pieces together, that really does form the basics. And most local search people will say, like, yeah, this is what it takes to rank in local. So it's interesting to look at that. Behavioral factors didn't see a lot of movement from 2015 to 2017 in calls to business, and a slight drop for directions. And so that's interesting to me, because the problem with behavioral factors is that we can't see them. They are this data that Google has that we don't have access to. So we can't say that getting more foot traffic to your business is going to increase rankings. We don't have any metrics on that. We don't have a tool where we can look that up. And so David Mim has done this amazing post. So this is he's not 100% focused on local search, but man, the guy still is thinking about and writing about local search like nobody's business. He wrote this amazing post that really blew my mind on his new website, Citations. The difference-making local ranking factor of 22. And what it is it's all these behavioral factors. Entity authority, like what is the authority of that actual business entity, and how does Google determine what that authority is? So for us as local search practitioners, we have this black box. It's all this data that Google has that we can't see. And so this is things like credit card data. It's very interesting to me. So Mike Blumenthal did a post where he talked about where those gas prices come from. If you go into Google right now and you type in gas stations, you'll actually see the price at the pump of all of those things. So where does Google get that data from? They get it from credit card data. They subscribe to some service that gives them this credit card data. So this makes you think, well, if they can get that kind of data, what else can they know about a business? They can understand number of transactions. They can understand, value of transactions, like what is the average price point. They can understand like how much business is this business doing. What's a better metric for a good business than how much business they're doing? If lots of people are going to that business, it's probably a popular and good business. For example, OpenTable, so in the restaurant space, how many bookings is this restaurant in the city booked all of the time? If it is, then that's probably an important ranking factor. That's a business you want to rank highly because that's clearly where people are going. Google Chrome, they have so much click-through data and behavioral data that they can get from Chrome. They can understand how people are interacting with your website. Are they spending time reading about your content? Are they clicking on your forms and you're clicking click to call on mobile and all that kind of stuff? The Google Maps app, so this is like driving directions. How many people are looking up your business on Google Maps? How many people are actually driving to the business? And then this one's amazing. This is basically like where people are going, and you can see that. So Google in Android or on the Google Maps app on iPhone, if you have location setting turned on the Google Maps app, they know where you go. So what's a better indicator of a business's prominence than actual people at the business? It doesn't make sense for service area businesses, I understand, but for like any kind of retail or restaurant or hotels, like this is interesting data that they can then use to evaluate, well, there's a lot of people here. This is a place that people like to go to. So these are all factors that we don't have any vision on. We don't have a tool that can give us this, but so this is why Dave is talking about this as a factor that's coming in the future. This is real world data, and so how do you rank for this? What are the factors to optimize for? Well, you can't. You just have to be a great business. You can get lots of reviews and you can be a great business, but for now, fortunately, this won't be happening until 2020. So for now, we can just keep building links and hopefully not spamming the business title, but there's things that you can do now that will work until 2020, according to David. So there's still lots of great SEO work that you can do that will improve your rankings until this entity authority really becomes the way Google ranks businesses. All right, that's the presentation. So I guess we'll get into some Q&A now.
Darren, that was so awesome. Thank you so much. So this is Brittany Waller speaking. Yeah, just to clarify for the listeners. And it was so fascinating to hear you speak about proximity and how that's taken such priority for local SEO. So I would just love to pick your brain on how can a business that targets a large surface area rank well in all those other suburb areas? So maybe a plumber that serves Denver and all the suburbs. How do they do that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So that question comes up all the time, and it's very difficult. So because your local pack results will really only be around your business, but you want to rank in local packs everywhere. You can either open an office in every neighborhood. That's going to be cost prohibitive for most businesses. Or you can target what's called the local organic results. The local organic results are city specific now. So if you rank well for, Plumbers Denver in the local organic results, you'll still get a lot of leads and customers coming through that. Not everyone relies on the local pack. There's still a lot of traffic you can get from the local finder results. From the local organic results. And Phil Rosick has written some great posts on that you can reference on how to make these city pages or neighborhood pages where you are making content that will target those areas. And then if you can build a couple localized links to those areas, then that's your best bet. But the local pack itself is pretty locked into your proximity. And then the other option, of course, which is why maybe Google is doing this, is Google Adwords. So you can rank in the ads across these other places. And I really think that Google's going to push more and more ads into the local pack and the local finder.
So I want to jump in because we have a number of questions that surround sort of home-based businesses or service area businesses.
Yes.
And there's a cluster of them. So Brittany, I just want to throw this in since we're on this topic. Somebody's asking about a home-based business with and using a UPS store or PO box.
Right.
What's the position on that? Is that verboten, or is that an acceptable way to establish a location?
It is against Google's guidelines. If Google catches onto it, they will ask you to not use that address anymore. And so your listing could get suspended, you should use your home address and then hide it. That is Google's recommendation. So if your business is based out of your house, then you should use your home address, and then on Google you can hide it. And then there are a handful of sites like Yelp, Yellow Pages, I believe, where you can still list your business but then hide the address. And so that's the tactic. You've got to you are at a disadvantage. If that's your business model, you're at a disadvantage to people that have offices, and I guess, but that's the way Google works right now.
So quick follow-up on that point about other sites that allow suppression of address. There's a few questions about citations. So there's a service area business or a home-based business where people don't want that address all over the internet. They don't want it. They don't want it to be distributed via citations. What's the relationship to citations? You sort of alluded to the fact that some Tier 1 sites will allow suppression of an address, but how do you deal with that more broadly across citations?
You can't. It's very hard. I would really think hard about whether it's that important to hide your address. Like, if you are a service-based business, no one's really going to show up at your door for your plumbing services. So if you want the benefit of local search, then you should definitely build out those citations with your home address and keep it visible. Otherwise, if you're really set on you must have it hidden, then probably open an office if you can afford it. Otherwise, local pack results. You should really focus on the local organic, and that's where you can target that with content and links.
And Darren, would that be the same advice you would give for a business owner who can't verify their location?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. If you can't verify your location because of, let's say it's on a brand new street. We see this a lot with sales centers for brand new developments in new neighborhoods that are being developed. If those streets don't exist, you can't really get a postcard to it.
Right.
And so that's when you contact Google My Business support, and they're pretty helpful with that kind of stuff. The best way to get to them is to tweet at them. If you Google My Business Twitter account, you'll find it. It's like Google Small Business or something like that. But if you tweet at them, then you'll start an email conversation with the U.S. team, which is good. If you phone them, you get the overseas team, and they're not as helpful as the U.S. team.
Gotcha. That's good to know.
So question here about the importance of attributes on Google My Business versus Google My Business descriptions. Can you distinguish them and rank them in importance?
Definitely. So the description field was never a ranking factor. You can put anything you want in there. Google completely ignored it in the ranking algorithm. Thankfully, they've gotten rid of it, so it's not even a question anymore. So you cannot edit your description on Google anymore. Attributes are huge, though. So especially when you're doing, Google's just trying to return the most refined results these days. So like if someone types in family-friendly restaurants, then the attributes will really kick in there, and you will rank better if you have that attribute set. If you don't have it set, you're kind of out of the running. And so attributes are great. Right now you can't edit them yourself, but that will be coming, I've heard, that Google My Business will let you sort of add some of your own attributes, which is great. And so you can really see it on Yelp. You know, Yelp has all of those attributes, and I think Google's trying to follow that kind of model with small businesses as well, where, you know, every little attribute about the business is recordable in a database. And once they have that, they can filter results on it, and they can surface search results based off of those attributes. So they're huge. If you're in a business that Google Maps is prompting people to enter attributes, then trying to get those attributes entered is a good idea.
So quick comment on that also ties into the David Mims kind of 2020 entity authority prediction, and then Brittany, you can jump back in. So a lot of people don't know, you know, if you go into your mobile device, either the Google app or google.com on mobile, your smartphone, you see these shortcuts under the search words: food, eat and drink, and weather. And if you click on eat and drink, what you see is a much different, rich display of cards, basically.
Yeah.
And you see the attributes on display there. And this is also pointing toward the future of Google's local search product. I don't know how aggressively they're going to promote this, but they're using location data. they're using third-party data, they're using machine learning to group businesses, and you can see the interplay of the attributes and the outside information in how they're presenting and organizing the results. And it'll provide some insight, I think, into Google's thinking about the future, at least of the mobile product. And it's quite a different experience than the conventional search results. So I just wanted to point that out. And then, Brittany, if you want to follow up.
Yeah, I think the personalization aspect of that is so fascinating, right? And I think David Mim mentions that in his 2020 article about when I'm searching for top breweries in my area, I don't want them to provide the breweries with the highest domain authority. I want them to pull information from my Google wallet and know what my preferences are, right? And factor those things in. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more of is Google taking this machine learning approach to really provide us answers and information before we even ask those questions.
Mm-hmm. And this ties into, digital assistants and voice search. So voice search and digital assistants get so much more powerful when they understand you. So the more data you give to Google on that. So if I say, breweries or where should I go for a beer? Okay, Google, where should I go for a beer? Google knows what kind of beer I like and sends me to places that have those attributes, right? So getting your business listing stuff sorted out, it's interesting. We see the local search ranking factors have this decrease on citations, but I actually think that in terms of, if you think about it from your business listings and the data that's in those listings, having the ability for Google to confirm that across multiple data sources is very powerful. So any sites that let you enter attributes, Yelp, for example, or customize the categories to a fine detail, there is value in making sure that your data is consistent across the web and it is enhanced and complete. So adding every possible field that you can is always a good thing.
Real quickly on that point, I mean, Yelp talks a lot about how people who've claimed their pages and added a lot of photographs, more than 10, see a big uplift in response rates and clicks and engagement. I assume that, as much sort of relevant, enhanced data you'd want to put in GMB and in these tier 1 sites as possible. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
That is a correct assumption, I would think. Yeah, I would think like the more data you have out there, the better, really. Yeah,
and don't you think,
you tell Google, just feed Google as much info as possible.
Yeah, and don't you think Google's going to start to grab more granular information from customers? I know when I visit somewhere, I leave, and now I'm getting prompts to answer, did this business location have gender-neutral bathrooms, right? They're really diving deep to figure out the nuances of the ins and outs of these businesses, and I just see them leveraging that more and more in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that as businesses gather that data, so there's this rich get richer situation where businesses that are busy and frequented, they get asked the questions, so Google has more data on those, and so those businesses rank for more terms, and then they get busier.
Yes.
So it's really important to try and be aware of that attribute stuff and where data Google's getting all this data from, and trying to make sure you're feeding it as much data as possible.
Quick, now we've got a bunch of sort of questions that are kind of coming in all over the place, but this is a kind of a unique question, but other people may be thinking about it. So the question is, what's the impact of changing the GMB primary phone number to a tracking number so they can track their calls? This is sort of recapitulates the age-old question about the use of tracking phone numbers. But what's your, Brittany or Darren, what's the position on that? It's specifically in GMB.
Yeah, so there's this like long-held belief in local search that tracking numbers are evil, and you do them and you'll destroy your ability to rank. I look at it as Google has 3 or 4 points of data to kind of triangulate to your business and say, this is this business. And so it's your business name, your address, your phone number, those are the primary NAP data, and then also your website. So let's say, in the past, Google's database wasn't as sophisticated. And so if you added a call tracking number, everything would fall apart. Google would not know that this was the right business because all of the data on the web had the other phone number. Nowadays, you can get away with it. I have seen people put a call tracking number on their Google listing and see no impact on rankings. And I believe that it's because Google can still associate that this is this business and associate with all the business information it has out there. It's like, this is kind of like the switch happened when they switched to the knowledge graph and the knowledge panel and entity-based search. So Google has this entity in its database. It's called Acme Plumbing, and this is all the stuff it knows about it. And so when it gathers stuff on the web, it can connect it through multiple points. And so you can get away with that phone number being different, and Google still knows that's your business, and your local search won't fall apart. But your mileage may vary. It's a risky endeavor. You could try it out. If you see a drop, then you can switch it back. And the risk on that isn't that huge. You would just lose the traffic for those days. But it would come back if you change the phone number back.
Yeah, and Darren, what's the tactic where people will use a tracking number but then change it on their website back to their regular number?
Yeah, it's called dynamic number replacement, and that's a great way to do it on your website. So there are services like CallRail is the one that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah,
so you can do that. So when people land on your website, they're showing a different number, but Google doesn't actually see that number because it detects for Googlebot, and so Googlebot gets to see the regular number. But you can track calls on your website from different pages. You can put different numbers on different pages, and that's all done through dynamic number insertion in JavaScript after the page loads. So even if Googlebot did pick it up, it's like it happens via JavaScript after the page load. So it's a safe way to do call tracking on your own website.
Okay, a lot of questions coming in. The people asking about when will the recording of the webinar be available. That's going to go out on Monday to everybody. Everybody who registered will get a copy of this, and we're going to try and do a blog post and kind of highlight some of the answers to questions that maybe we didn't get to. So let's see if we can get to a number of additional ones. We're going to go along as long as we're answering questions. So we had questions about the citation hierarchy. So you broke it out into 4 tiers, basically primary data sources, and then the subsequent tier 1, tier 2, and so on of directory sites. People are asking for examples. You sort of alluded to some of them, but is there any place that in the local search ranking factors study right up on the Moz blog or the Moz site or anywhere else where these are identified or distinguished in any place?
No, but I will publish a post next week. That's a great idea. I think that needs to be defined. My version of it will be slightly different from someone else's version of it. Everyone's got a different version of what they think are the most important citation sources. But I think it's a great thing for us to put up. If you go to our Whitespark citation audit and cleanup service, you can see a breakdown of the sites in our sort of like where you pick your plans. And so we order them by the top 20, the next top 10, the next top 30, top 40, top 50. And so you can see sort of the importance, and they are sorted that way. But I would say the primary sources are Google, Bing, Apple Maps. Those are critical, of course. Those are the primary places people search for businesses. Then you have the primary data aggregator. So this would be Infogroup, Axiom, Localese, Factual. Those 7, I would say, make up the primary data sources. Secondary data sources, so tier 1, I guess we would call them, would be these sites that show up. If you just Google any business, local business query, you'll often see these sites showing up in the Google search results. And so these are sites like Yelp, of course, is huge. In travel, it would be TripAdvisor. In restaurants, it would be Zomato, OpenTable. In lawyers, it would be Avo. So any of these sites, they're often industry specific, but Yellow Pages is a big one. It shows up everywhere. MapQuest shows up sometimes. Better Business Bureau shows up sometimes. So anything that's sort of showing up in the search results, I call them tier 1. Tier 2 are sites that you don't see very often, but it's still good to have your data accurate on them. These would be sites like, I don't know, To Find Local or Merchant Circle, Brown Book. These are sites that you see on lists of business listing sites, but you don't see them very often in the search results. They're not as prominent. And then the other tier is just all the other crap that's out there. There's probably hundreds of different citation sources, and some people believe that the more you build, the better you rank, and I think there might be a bit of truth to that, but you get diminishing returns. The further you go down that list to like the bottom of the barrel, the less value there is in those citations. So what I usually recommend is that people make sure that the core citations are you're definitely listed and you don't have any duplicates, and it's accurate on all of those up until like the top sort of 20 sites. Then the rest of them, I don't really worry about consistency on them, but I'd like to be listed on them. I feel like it's an easy win for local search. The more places you're listed, it can have a slight bump to your local search, and so it's good to get listed, but I don't agonize about making sure that my citations are accurate on them, or that I don't care about duplicates on them. And then the further you go, finishing returns.
And Darren, I also think it should just be mentioned really quickly, you did such a cool job of basically creating those fake company profiles to identify what citations feed other citations, which blows my mind. And I think that is also at the core of it, right?
Yeah, that it helps you to understand what I did with that study. So I presented that at MozCon 2016, and the concept there was I wanted to test what happens when you submit to the data aggregators. How long does it take for it to distribute to all of their claimed distribution network? Which sites do you actually show up on? And so we did some research on that, and it helped us to evaluate which of the data aggregators are a little bit stronger than others. And so we're about to publish the new local search ecosystem. So also in combination or in collaboration with David Mim, we're local search ecosystem that will be going live on the Whitespark site within a couple weeks, and it'll be dynamic. So you can mouse over info group, and you can see all the sites that info group feeds. If you can mouse over locally, see all the sites that they feed and the strength of those relationships. And so that's largely based off of that research plus the published data about where they. That's a very useful resource, and that's why we call them the primary data sources, because they feed so many other sites in the ecosystem. So if your data is let's say you go to Merchant Circle and you fix your listing, but then 6 months later, Merchant Circle picks up a new feed from Info Group, it has the wrong info, then that duplicate pops up again. And so that's why it's important to sort your data out at the primary data sources, and that you should refer to the local search ecosystem. And the current local search ecosystem that's on the Moz blog or on the Moz website is still a good reference point. I think it hasn't been updated since 2013, so the new update is coming soon, and I encourage people to look at that when we publish it.
So we're a little bit over the hour mark, but we still have a ton of questions coming in, so we're going to stay on.
I'm in no rush.
And I'm going to try and make these coherent or follow a certain kind of flow, but there's just a bunch of stuff coming in, sort of very specific stuff. So one sort of big picture thing that is touched on by a couple of these questions that I want to get a response to from either or both of you is, we didn't hear about this in the presentation really. So we've got mobile versus desktop, and then we've got specific industry kinds of search results. Are there any high-level things that you would say about ranking factors on desktop versus mobile? I mean, proximity is obviously one. Or by industry vertical. Do we see major changes if we're talking about these different categories? Can you either of you say anything at a high level about that?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I could say that I'm surprisingly seeing, like if I went back 2 years ago, I would see a pretty stark difference between the results on mobile versus desktop. Nowadays, I don't see it as much. Google tries to approximate your location and gives you results around a pretty tight proximity around what they think that location is, even on desktop. The biggest thing you can do for mobile is mostly on your website. So you want to make sure that your website is mobile friendly, preferably responsive, and you should look at a lot of stuff that Cindy Crum publishes and speaks about. She's the person I would turn to for advice on mobile friendliness. But I actually don't see a huge difference between desktop and mobile results these days.
Yeah.
And what about go ahead, Brittany. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say Cindy is definitely the mobile resource. She's unbelievable and definitely knows her stuff as far as local and mobile-related local searches. But I would say, in terms of what Darren just said, engagement too. Like Darren and Rand called this years ago, right? But that continues to be a factor across desktop and across mobile. So I also don't see it being a huge thing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also recommend Bryson Meunier for mobile search related content, because he's another one who does who's very deep into the mobile space. But keep going, Darren.
No, I think that's it. I was just going to say, Cindy, we love you. She's awesome.
So anything to say on specific industries like travel or hospitality or restaurants or home services? Any differences that you observed specifically?
There's differences in the pack styles, right? So we can see that the hospitality and restaurants get the snack pack style. In terms of ranking factors, I don't think that there is that much different about it. So what makes a lawyer rank is very similar to what makes a hotel rank. It's really about the entity, right? So there's this business entity. It's either a hotel or a lawyer or a law firm, and Google collects data about it from around the web. So the way to optimize is the same. So you get as much information to Google about that, and this idea that your website is just another data source is very valid. So improving your website that's a data source you have great control over, and so website optimization and improvement. Especially if you're talking about multi-location in hospitality, either in restaurants or hospitality, having excellent location pages is a huge factor. So a lot of people fail on that right now, but I think they're getting smarter about it. And even if you're a law firm with 4 locations, having excellent location pages is a big deal. So feeding Google the data is the same across every industry.
Yeah,
so on that, go ahead. Sorry, Brittany.
No, I was just going to say, I like what Darren had said. I think it was at MozCon Local about this industry situation where you really do have to look and see what big sites live on the #1 search result page for your niche, right? So for a roofing contractor, that might be Home Advisor. So to really start to dive in and focus in on those specific niche websites and try to get links from those guys industry-wise will help as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, great. Landing pages, local landing pages, you just alluded to that. So somebody's asking about city landing pages. Are they worth your time? Do they have a positive impact on SEO? We don't know anything about the business that just asked that question. Presumably, sure. I'm assuming it's going to be somebody with multiple locations or a national footprint. Should there be a location page for every single location?
Okay, so if it's a multi-location brand with actual physical locations, then more than 5, then absolutely you want a location page for every single location, and I recommend that your Google My Business listing links to the location page, and you want to blow those pages out with as much unique, fresh content as possible. You can feed those pages content through testimonials for that particular location, like reviews for that location, staff bios, specials of the week, whatever is unique to that location. And then you should also talk about, what's unique to the location geographically, like, we're close to this landmark, all that kind of stuff. Just really anchoring the location to the place is helpful. If we're talking about a service area business that is just trying to rank in multiple places, and this idea of city pages, is that valid? I'll tell you, it's very valid, and there's lots of traffic you can get and a lot of business you can get from these pages if you do them right. One of my favorite examples, we built this out like way back in 2011, or I think. This is for pringlelaw.ca. If you look at the areas we serve, they don't actually have physical locations in all of those spots, but they get a ton of traffic. So they rank very well for like, city criminal lawyer, city, impaired driving lawyer. So these city pages, they do rank and they do drive business. So, it's the effort of creating a web page, which is 3 hours of work maybe, and you put it up and you're now getting more business from that area than you did before. So it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think too, so I had just met Heather Physiok at the MozCon Local conference, but in my opinion, she gave one of the most actionable talks at MozCon Local about how to create those location pages. And basically this merriment of both global and local pages and working with local individuals to speak their language, to speak about the region, and to really dive deep to provide quality over just quantity, cookie cutter listing pages, which I thought was phenomenal.
Right.
So would these kinds of local landing pages or local content pages be a response to the service area business problem question? People don't want to expose a home address or a specific business address. Would that be a recommendation that you would make to those folks as a way to sort of generate?
Yep. Yeah, for them, I think it's Adwords is one approach, and then these city pages, definitely build them out, build up these like areas we serve type section of your website, and then build a page for every area served. Well, I probably wouldn't go beyond 20. You're kind of stretching things if you're trying to hit more than that. But yeah, that's the general idea. And Phil Rosick has amazing articles on this, which we should put in the show notes or whatever on the blog post or whatever. I'll link to those after.
Okay. Related question. Somebody's asking about their client has more than 200 cities listed as areas served in their GMB entry. Is that overkill? Are there going to be any repercussions? Is there sort of a maximum or minimum? I mean, not minimum, but is there sort of a maximum that you to speak to that? Either. Yeah,
it's a little bit useless because you won't you don't need that. I would just pretty much put their primary area. Like if they're in Chicago, then just put Chicago, because you won't rank outside of that. You can put as many places as you want in that areas we serve within the GMB listing, but because of proximity, you won't actually rank in there. So it's more like information for people that look at your business on Google. It won't help you rank, but it gives the searcher some information that you do serve those areas. So you can put it in there, but it's not going to really impact your rankings within those areas.
Business name, title, spam questions that are sort of tied together. Okay, yep. So somebody's asking what qualifies as abuse in the GMB title. So let's say the example given is company name, IT service. Can you use company name, IT service of place, like Utah or Denver or whatever, or does that qualify as abuse if you add the geography, the keyword in there?
Yeah, it qualifies as abuse. Anything that is not your actual real-world business name qualifies as abuse. The one workaround is that you could register what's called a assumed name or a DBA, a doing business as name, and you can actually register those with the Secretary of State, because if this is how your business is actually represented out in the world, then you're allowed to use that on your Google My Business listing. So that's really the only way to get there, is if you really use that name in the real world and you have registered at the Secretary of State. Otherwise, it's a violation of Google's guidelines.
Okay, that kind of brought. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. And Casey Mraz just wrote a really cool post about that on Moz, which I loved. But it's similar to Mike Blumenthal's post about, what did he call it, the Spam Hall of Fame? But unfortunately, it's currently working, right? So it's frustrating to see, and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. But I totally agree with Darren. Why wouldn't Google start to clean up this space at some point, and why risk it?
Well, there is a conspiracy theory that they don't want to clean it up because when it
forces people to do AdWords.
Exactly. Yeah. So, who knows? Maybe they will never bother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a sort of a variation on the service area business question, but it's specific enough that it's worth kind of addressing. So a business that is mobile, like a food truck or something like that, there are a handful of folks, or a pop-up store or something where it's not in a fixed location, but it does have a location. So what would you recommend there?
In that case, I have seen this situation before where there's let's say it's a windshield repair service and it's currently at this mall, and they'll do this mall for 2 weeks, and then they move to another mall for 2 weeks. You can actually go and update your Google My Business listing with the new address. When you do that, you your business listings, but it goes back to this idea that Google can triangulate your data on multiple points, and so you can generally get away with that without hurting your local search too much. You keep your citations as they are and update your listing on Google, and it's an interesting business model really to just move around like that. And it is manageable. You can still you will actually see your rankings go up in the new place that you've set your location to.
Yeah, and this is maybe like a too radical approach, but I've seen it work for things like food trucks and things that move around, but to use these applications that everyone's on to take advantage of people in your proximity like Tinder. So I know this is kind of off the grid marketing stuff, but I have been fascinated by food trucks in the Denver area that I've spoken to and have leveraged Tinder and given away special deals to anyone that sees it on Tinder and says a certain thing and gets, you know, something for free. So I think some of those out of the box thinking things too are just fascinating.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
As Facebook gets bigger into local search, I can certainly see some of that stuff happening on Facebook as well, and they're really pushing into that market.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So still a bunch of questions. We're 15 minutes over the hour. We still have almost 500 people listening, so we're going to keep going a little while longer. And again, try and answer as many of these as we can on the blog post and in the materials we send out afterwards. So there's a couple of questions that are sort of along the same lines as the one I'm about to read. So somebody the example is a hotel that contains a restaurant, an art gallery, a spa, which are all essentially independent businesses, distinct businesses, may have different owners or licensees or whatever.
Yep.
But they're all at the single address.
Right.
You know, this alludes to the commercial building that has the lawyer and the dentist and the psychologist. Also, It's the same address with a different suite number. Can you speak to those examples?
Yeah, for sure. So that hotel situation is totally fine. The only place that you can really get into trouble is if you use the same phone number. So make sure that there's a unique phone number for each location, and then they're all eligible for a listing on Google, and they're all eligible to go and list throughout the web through Citations, right? So the spa should have, it can be at the same address, that's fine, as long as it has a unique name and a unique phone number and a different URL. So it's also a smart idea to not link all of those to the homepage of the hotel. You would link them to the specific location pages in your Google My Business listing. And then you've got enough variation there that Google says, oh yeah, this is a separate business at that address. And think of an office tower, right? Like how many businesses are in one office tower? It's a pretty common scenario that Google definitely knows how to deal with. So it's perfectly fine. Just don't make the mistake of using the same phone number. You need a unique phone number for each location.
And this might be a dumb question, Darren, but I remember hearing maybe a couple of years ago that to just attach a random suite number that would then come to that address and it would set you apart from kind of those groups of companies within the same location. Is that still the case, or just to make sure you have a different phone number?
That's an awesome question because it's a great myth-busting question, because the truth of the matter is that Google ignores the suite number. The suite number is like...
Really?
Yeah, you could consider it for display purposes only, but Google really doesn't factor in suite numbers. The address is the physical address of the building itself. And so, yeah, consider suite numbers display purposes only, and they will not at your variation. So this is also a great thing for people to know. Where they go around the web, they try to change their suite number because one site listed it as SWITE. One place just put a number sign. They're like, oh my God, my consistency. But that's actually not an issue. You don't have to worry about that suite part. Don't worry about it.
Oh my gosh. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that question.
So a question about reviews. So somebody's asking about business owner responses to reviews.
Yes.
Comments. Are responses to reviews or comments in the GMB listing factored into ranking? So does the review response or owner commentary matter at all versus just the presence of reviews?
Yeah, my testing says no, because I heard that at MozCon Local 2016. Someone said it, and it was like my mind was blown. The idea that you could, put keywords into your owner responses, like, thank you for reviewing our drain cleaning Denver business, right? Like the idea that you could sort of inject keywords into the owner response.
Spam the response, yeah.
So that idea really was interesting to me. So I tested the heck out of it and spammed a whole bunch of owner responses and measured it for over 2 months, and I saw absolutely no lift. So then I took all the spam out of the owner responses. But I don't think it impacts it at all. I think Google is smart enough to differentiate between a review. And I did this not just on Google My Business. I did it on Yelp reviews. I also did it on Yellow Pages reviews. And so Google's smart enough to know what's a a review and what's an owner response. And so there is no tactic there. There's nothing you can really do on the owner responses. I think adding a handful of owner responses might be a behavioral signal. It's something that Google might see that you are an active and engaged business. And so it's always a good idea to respond to some of them, especially in the cases where you get a negative review. Taking the time to respond appropriately to that is always a good idea.
Yeah, and just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, but didn't Mike Blumenthal do that really cool Yelp experiment where he basically wanted Third Base Bar in Oleans, New York to rank for Dive Bar? And so him and Mary and a couple other people were putting reviews on Yelp with the keywords Dive Bar. And so sure enough, they ranked for it.
Absolutely. Keywords and reviews are huge. I think that there's a massive benefit to that. We were talking about owner responses, so if you add your own things, but yeah, that's an amazing case study, because what happens there is it just shows the authority of Yelp as a source that Google is super looking at. Google looks at Yelp and it's like, oh, this business is becoming prominent on Yelp. Boom, local pack appears for it, right? And so it's amazing what you can do with Yelp. And it makes sense, really, because Yelp is so stingy with their reviews. They have a very strict filter. So a business that is gaining prominence on Yelp it's generally legit. It's hard to spam Yelp, and so it would make sense that Google looks at that and generates some impact for the businesses from it. So it's worth it to focus on your Yelp strategy and try to make sure that you're ranking well in Yelp. And that applies to all industries. You might just think it's restaurants or hotels or whatever, but plumbers, lawyers, every industry, working on Yelp is a good idea. But don't ask people for Yelp reviews. If you do, they're going to get filtered, because a Yelp review, if you ask somebody that isn't a Yelper, they'll just go create an account, leave a review, and then never use Yelp again, and that'll get filtered because it's an inactive user. You want to get reviews from people that are active on Yelp, and you can find them. You can actually upload your mailing list to find people on Yelp, and it'll show you your active customers that are also active Yelpers, and so that's a really good way. And then you could target them and say, hey, did you know we're on Yelp? You're not supposed to ask for Yelp reviews, but you could say, oh, we'd love it if you checked out our Yelp page.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah. And you can do a one-off too. Go ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say you can do a one-off as well, where you can just enter like one person's email into the Find People on Yelp. It'll tell you if they have a Yelp account and if they're active.
That's so cool.
Well, so that whole point about sort of the custom audiences like functionality on Yelp, that I didn't know anything about that. That's very interesting as a way to stimulate sort of your own audience on Yelp to leave reviews. I mean, I think that's a really kind of largely unknown tactic that is pretty interesting. So that's a subject of a separate webinar, right? But
sure, like a whole webinar on that.
Well, reviews is worth for sure. Best practices.
Yeah, I would love to do reviews.
Yeah, advanced tips on review. Responding to reviews, generating reviews. Question about Google+. So somebody's saying, should I still be using the publisher and authorship markup even if the page is largely inactive, if there's no following, there's no engagement on the Google Plus page? Is that going to be valuable in any way to ranking, if you understood the question?
Yeah, I do understand the question. I don't think that the publisher authorship stuff is any kind of factor at all anymore. I feel like I heard someone say that maybe it was still a factor, but Google Plus is a very interesting one. You can look at it as another place for Google to gather information about the engagement and authority of your business. If lots of people on Google Plus are talking about your business, then that's just another signal that Google might pick up on. And Mike Blumenthal recently did a study where, he really worked on Google Plus through a company called Steady Demand for his standard client, Barbara Oliver, and her rankings went up as a result of the Google Plus activity. So everyone thought Google Plus was dead, but Google is listening to activity on Google Plus, and when you get a lot of followers and you get a lot of engagements on your posts, then those are, I think, maybe behavioral metrics that Google notices. And so there is something to be said about activity on Google Plus. You could use it to help improve your rankings, but I think it requires a significant effort. Like, you've got to put in the time, and you've got to build up a following, and you've got to be engaged in community. So, but there's something to be said about Google Plus. But authorship and publisher stuff, I don't think there's much stock in that.
So we're coming up against the 1.5 hour mark here, and I think I want to let people go, even though we've got over 400 people still on the line. We've got a ton of service area related questions, so I think what I'm going to do is try and organize those and let us sort of follow up and maybe do a blog post on that stuff, because there's just many of them, and many of them are very specific. Something we have not touched on at all, that a couple of questions are coming through, are about link building and local links.
Right.
So this is an area of mystification, and whenever you go to a conference and some local SEO expert gets up, they say stuff like, "Oh, you got to reach out to the local church group and join the Chamber of Commerce," and all these sort of canned pieces of advice.
Yeah.
What would you guys say about what's an ethical and appropriate and effective way to go about generating local links? And I'll make one editorial comment in advance of that. What Google would say is just create a bunch of great content, blog, build pages, give people advice, and the links will take care of themselves, and don't worry about link building. That's what Google would say. But what would you guys say about practical advice about local link building in an ethical way for these folks on the line here?
Brittany, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I've got a couple of points to that. So first and foremost, go with your low-hanging fruit, right? Evaluate who your current local partners are that would be willing to link to you. Easy way to do that is to basically take a good look at their website, look at their about page, and consider what sort of quote could you provide as a third party to boost them up, right? What sort of testimonial could you give to these people that you already work with that they could then put on their website with a link back to yours? That's a really, really simple way of going about and getting local links. Some other ways are obviously just to replace and update competitive content that people are linking to. Ego bait influencers, that's kind of been done over and over again and is sort of, the broken record of link building. And I think the create great content has also sort of been overplayed, but to really consider what is it that you could grab with data and relate to some parallel or provide some sort of value that you're not going to go that far to provide, right? What can really set you apart? And I would suggest focusing on one really incredible piece of content that might also help your competitors and the niche that you're in, instead of providing these one-off crappy blog posts that you just think you're supposed to be producing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
you said to help your competitors, but I assume you meant help your customers.
No. So, and honestly, this is my own personal theory, and I've seen it work in a couple of different industries, but essentially, if you can create a piece of content that is so valuable that not only can you use it to leverage what your service or what your products are providing, that your other competitors can also use it. So an example of something I've been playing around with recently is roofing companies, right? They need to go to these homes that recently had hail damage and let them know what the odds are of their roofs having hail damage, whether or not the owners allow them to inspect the roof, right? So something that could be of huge value is pulling in NOAA information, right, weather information, and allowing people to enter in their zip code, and it would provide the hailstorms that may have hit them within the last 5 years. First of all, that just tells them whether or not their warranty is up, right, or if their insurance will likely take care of any recent damage. And that is something that your competitors would want to use, because that is helping them leverage sales for their businesses as well. And I've always been a believer that if Google looks at signals of competitive websites also linking to you, it's a home run.
I am with Brittany on that. So that was a great example with that the roofing company. Another interesting example is I've seen an auto repair shop that put together a calendar of events for upcoming car shows. So, like the Old Timers car show, like every car show that happened in the city, they had this great calendar of events for it. And then they reached out to every of the car shows. They got a ton of links from that. They also linked out to a lot of the car advocate groups in the city, and they got a bunch of links from that. So that's a killer example if you think about like calendars, or I've also heard a similar to that vein is an accident lawyer that put together a map of all bicycle accidents in a city, and it was always up to date, and it was fed by this data that they were getting from the city. And so they had this sort of mashup where they built this great thing. Now, those ideas are amazing and they're great. They're sometimes out of reach of a lot of small businesses. Like a lot of small businesses have a hard time having either the budget or the time to build a resource like that. And so the ones that are easy wins are certainly sponsorships. You talked about the church thing. So sponsoring your local charities, local 5K runs, churches, that kind of stuff. I think there's women's shelters, any of those kinds of sponsorships can turn into good links. And then, as Brittany also alluded to, partnering up with other businesses that you do work with. So if they have a page that links, that you can get them linked to you, that kind of stuff. And offering special deals to business partners or compatible businesses. Like, I don't know, maybe a bakery could offer a 10% discount to the local personal trainers. I don't know, something like that.
Okay, we can really go on and on and on, and now, as always happens in these situations, there's a whole bunch of questions, some good questions at the end. We're going to try and respond to as many of these as we can in a blog post or with information that'll go out on Monday. Everybody's going to get the recording on Monday. I'd like to offer both of you, sort of before we sign off, an opportunity to give some final statement or a piece of advice, however specific or general, to the listeners on the call. We've got a whole bunch of different people, some people from agencies, some people in-house, some people with publishers. What is the one or two things that they should think about or take away from this this discussion here today?
For me, if you look at the ranking factors, links really stood out there. It's link building is hard, but it is certainly something to focus on. One thing that didn't stand out in the factors that I think is certainly worth mentioning is long-form content. I have seen it work gangbusters for businesses that really take the time to blow out their content. So if you were a divorce lawyer and you wrote 2,000 or to 20,000 word article on child custody laws in your state, that is the kind of stuff that can really move the needle. Though that kind of next level content is huge, and so I think there's a massive opportunity there. And I think reviews didn't get enough talk in this webinar. Reviews are also massive. I think that getting a great review strategy in place, asking every customer and diversifying the sites that you're getting reviews on can certainly have a very good impact on your local search, and that it's something you should invest in.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that. I think reviews are definitely huge. It's one of the leading factors of what makes people decide to go with a certain business.
Right.
But in addition to that, I also think, and Darren, you called this years ago, Rand Fishkin called this years ago. You guys are amazing. But the engagement metrics, it just makes so much sense for Google to go this way, because like David had mentioned in his post, maybe 1 out of 1,000 people have ever created a hyperlink, and maybe 10 to 20% of people have ever left a review.
Right.
But 100% of us carry our phones wherever we go, and 100% of us use maps, right? If we have access to the internet, we are using maps, we're active. Why would you not use that real world data in real time? And so just to do really great business and to create those engagement opportunities while you're working with your customers.
Yeah, a great point.
Go ahead, Darren, finish up.
Sorry, one other thing I wanted to say, I wanted to point you to Dana DiTomaso's presentation from the Portland, it used to be called Search Fest, can't remember what it's called now, but her presentation there was about how you optimize for some of those metrics, and she's got some great ideas in that. So I would,
where can people find that? Dana
DiTomaso's SlideShare, you'll find it there for sure. It's Portland, and she talks a lot about, what are some things that you can do to try and improve, get more engagement metrics, and so there's some good stuff in there.
And if you want to read the Moz Local Ranking Factors report that Darren talked about and broke down during the presentation, that link is in the presentation that you'll get on Monday. But you can just search for Moz Local Ranking Factors, and you can find it that way. So thanks to everybody who stayed with us for the full hour and a half. This is the longest webinar I think I've done, but we had you know, an enormous number of questions and people. Thank you, Darren, for contributing, and we'll try and answer many of these if we can, cluster them and answer them on blog posts that will go out, and we'll provide some additional links and other information for you. You know, fascinating stuff. Thank you both very much, and thanks everybody for listening. You'll get the recording on Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.